What's up, insomniacs? Just want to take this time to say thanks again for all the likes, comments, and subscribers out there. And just for the listeners also, we appreciate you. Well, on to the stories.
Story number one.
This happened to my best friend Samantha around 2 years ago. We are both studying in the same city, only at different colleges, so we're living in different parts of the city. One day, while Samantha was studying for her exam, she realized that there was no food in the fridge, so she decided to go out for a walk and do some grocery shopping. There was a fairly large and well-supplied supermarket chain close to her apartment complex, where she stopped by for some fruits and noodles. She spent around 15 minutes in the supermarket only to be greeted by a complete stranger outside who started having a small conversation with her. He acted like they knew each other, although Samantha is positive that she had never seen him before. Overall, Samantha is a very polite and tolerant person, but also very cautious of strangers. She described him as a short, overweight guy with a goatee and a wide, odd grin on his face. On the other hand, my best friend is tall and she seems like a girl you would not mess with. She noticed that his fingers were somehow twitching while he spoke, indicating that he was nervous. The guy was at least 45 years old, and my best friend was a junior at the time in college. Immediately, she realized that something was wrong with this guy. First, he greeted her by saying that he had spotted her in the area a few times, and then proceeded to ask her on a coffee date at a nearby Starbucks. Samantha was just standing there speechless and politely declined. It made him really mad when Samantha declined, insisting that she go with him. When she refused again, he angrily told her that they would see each other again soon, calling her by her full name. She was absolutely dumbfounded by this, wondering how on earth this creep had found out her real name. She had no clue who this guy was, and he didn't seem like a college student at all, but rather a construction worker, judging by the clothes that he was wearing. A myriad of questions came to her mind. She was afraid that she may have been stalked by this gentleman. She threatened to call the police if he didn't just give up on his advances and leave her alone. Obviously, my best friend wasn't in the least bit interested in this creep. But if you think her story ends there, then you're wrong. Next thing she did was part ways with him. He stood in the same spot for a moment, and then she said she went into her car and noticed that he started following her a few blocks down the street in a dark-colored minivan with tinted windows. When Samantha realized this, she got even more paranoid and scared. So she had to take some lesser-known routes in order to get to her apartment safely. The sun was just starting to set at this point. After some shortcuts, she managed to arrive back to her apartment, but she was left feeling paranoid from the whole incident, wondering whether he knew where her apartment was. She never reported the incident to the police, although she vividly remembers his facial features and overall appearance. Fortunately, nothing ever happened after this, and she has not seen this creep since. I really hope it stays that way. For all of you out there, please be careful and mindful of your surroundings. I work pretty standard 9 to 5 hours. That is the most convenient time for me to go to work. One day, I needed a few things I was planning on cooking for dinner. I stopped at my local Publix When I got there, it was really busy. The parking lot had many cars in it when I got inside, and the store was bustling. It wasn't terribly loud, but there was a good amount of noise and movement in the store. I made my way around the Publix from aisle to aisle, picking up what I needed along the way. I spent maybe about 60 minutes in total shopping. When I was done, I used the self-checkout to pay for everything. After that, I walked back to my car, put my groceries in the trunk, and I drove home. When I was almost home, I stopped at a gas station because I realized that my gas tank was almost empty. And when I realized that I didn't have my wallet, I panicked. I was checking my pockets and pulled over and checked the bags to see if I left it in one of the grocery bags. However, to my dissatisfaction, I didn't find my wallet. I started trying to remember where I could have left it, when suddenly I realized that I paid for the groceries. Therefore, I must have left it at the grocery store, and the self-checkout was fairly busy. Therefore, if I dropped my wallet, surely someone, whether it's a worker or a customer, would have noticed. I decided to call the grocery store when unfortunately they checked the lost and found and stated that nobody has turned in a wallet, nor did they have one in their lost and found. Disheveled, I decided just to return home and see what my next step would be. It took me 15 minutes from the gas station to get home, when all of a sudden, as I was approaching my front door, right there on the floor of my welcome mat was my wallet. I was delighted with joy to find my wallet, but as I opened it, I noticed all the cash and the credit cards were missing. And then I began to wonder, how did my wallet get home before I did? And my driver's license had my old address. Therefore, there's no way a stranger could have found my wallet and returned it before I got home. The only thing I can think of is that one of my neighbors or one of my family members saw me drop my wallet or saw that I left the wallet somewhere and returned it home. Still to this day, it is a mystery to me.
Story number 3.
I work at a grocery store, mainly stocking shelves. This is something that happened a few months ago. Most of the time that I work, it's evenings and occasionally the graveyard shift because I'm a college student, so it allows me to focus on school during the day. So a few months ago, I'd been working there for probably about 3 weeks, and I had just gotten used to everything. The grocery store is sort of a big place, and there's a good number of other employees. So this new guy that they hired, first time I noticed him, he came across to me as a total creep. He did pretty much the same thing as me, but in a different section of the store. The first time I saw him, he was staring at me. He was short, skinny, and had long, stringy blonde hair. I had just finished stocking an item and was going to the back to get another. When I got up, I saw him just standing there at the end of the aisle, staring at me with wide eyes. When I got up and saw him, he disappeared behind the aisle. I ignored it. This is a very similar thing that happens at least 3 or 4 times over the next week. Whenever I saw the guy, he seemed to be staring at me or acting really strange in general. I just thought he was maybe very timid and shy and never really spoke to people and just socially awkward. It didn't bother me too much. We all have coworkers that we might not get along with, but it shouldn't stop us from being a professional and doing a good job. One time in particular, I was stocking a shelf on a quiet night. I spent maybe 30 minutes in this one aisle. At one point, I turned around, and when I did, I barely noticed the guy. looking through the aisle from the other side. It was like he created an opening by the cans, pushing them aside so that he could stare at me through the aisle. I only glanced at him for a moment and then played it off. I felt sort of creeped out by this in a serious way. Now, how long he had been watching me and why I decided that I would go over and try to casually start a conversation with this creep, maybe he could explain his weird behavior. Whatever. It was when I was done with my task. Before I started another, I walked over to the aisle that he was in. When I approached, he did not look at me or in my direction. I got right next to him, and he still wasn't looking at me. I said, "Hello," and he looked at me and then mumbled, talking cautiously, asking how his day was going and whatnot. The only response I got were one-worded and very short. He didn't seem friendly at all. In fact, he actually seemed annoyed that I was talking to him. I walked away after speaking with him for about maybe 30 seconds, and I concluded that this guy was crazy and a creep, and I had no interest in interacting with him again. I went back into the back to get another cart of items to stock the store shelves. When I got into the back room though, I kind of had to use the restroom, and I decided to do that first. We had a restroom for employees only, and that was in the hallway in the back of the store. I went inside, and after using it, washing my hands, I went to leave, but the door wouldn't open. I heard some footsteps and noises outside the door, but you couldn't really hear outside very well from in the bathroom. I thought nothing of it. I tried opening the door several more times, but I couldn't do it. Finally, I had to literally run into the door with full force of my body weight, and it finally came open. There was a shopping cart with several heavy boxes in it that had been pinned right up against the door. I had to knock it over in order to get out. Immediately, I guessed who had done it. I looked around and I didn't see anybody else in the back at all. I walked right over to find the guy and asked why he had done that. Maybe this was his idea of a joke. And I know, I probably shouldn't have accused a crazy creep as to why he would play a prank, but hey, what can you do? I got out, sure enough, he was already staring in my direction, so I assumed it must have been him. I walked right up to him and asked him why he had locked me in the bathroom. The guy just denied it and then walked away. That didn't change my mind at all, and I still knew it was him. After that, I just got back to work again. I was now working at one far end of the store. I had about an hour left of work and wanted to get done what I was supposed to do. As I was walking in the far corner, at one point I heard footsteps behind me. They were really slow, and I glanced over my shoulder to see the same guy. He was pretty far back, but staring at me. He was really getting on my nerves, but I chose to ignore it. A couple minutes later, he was closer. I looked back to see him standing directly behind me now, about 5 feet away. He wasn't hiding behind anything. I immediately got up and literally ran out of there. He remained standing there, expressionless. I went to the far end aisle of the store, away from him as I could, and basically spent the rest of my night just walking around the store, looking over my shoulder, trying to avoid this creep. Luckily, I didn't see him again all night. I got off a short time later, and I didn't see the guy leave the store at all. One day, another coworker asked me if I had heard about Marty. I asked, "Who is Marty?" And when he described him to me, I realized that was the creepy guy. I was told that he had been fired and also arrested for punching our manager and trying to choke him. I was shocked, but not really shocked, of the individual and what he had done. He had been planning to hurt me when he was sneaking up on me that night about a couple days ago.